Hi, my name's Odlin, and last week my own family laughed at me in public, not behind closed doors, not during a fight, but at a luxury car showroom where they told the salesman I was too cheap to belong there, where my mother handed me a rag to wipe down a Ferrari like I was part of the cleaning crew, where my sister whispered, "At least now we look generous." They mocked me, they erased me, and then they kicked me out, but what they didn't know was that I hadn't come alone, and the man pulling up next, he didn't need to raise his voice to change everything. Before we dive in, tell me, what time are you listening to this and where from? Because this isn't just a story about money, it's about quiet betrayal, silent revenge, and a woman they thought was invisible until it was far too late. I still remember how soft her voice sounded when she asked, like it was just another casual morning. Odlin, my mother said over the phone, Celine's thinking of getting a new car. Want to come with us to the dealership? Could be fun. It wasn't a question, not really. I paused just long enough for her to hear the hesitation, but not long enough to admit how much I hated those kinds of outings. I'd spent most of my life as an afterthought in that family, and when I wasn't invisible, I was useful. Still, I told her I'd go, because that's what daughters do when they're clinging to the final thread of what family used to mean. The next morning, I stood outside the Boston showroom parking lot next to Celine in her gold-tinted sunglasses and Louis Vuitton heels while I adjusted the strap of my faded canvas bag. I'd worn jeans and a gray cardigan. It was chilly that morning, but not enough to explain the cold I felt as soon as we stepped through the glass doors. I vanished. The showroom gleamed with polished chrome and expensive silence. My parents walked in like they owned the place. My sister smiled like she belonged there. Salesmen practically fell over themselves to greet them. No one looked at me. No one asked if I needed anything. No one even tried. Mom didn't introduce me. Dad wandered toward a Porsche like he already knew what Celine was going to choose. I trailed behind them, careful not to bump into anything that looked like it cost more than my last 4 paychecks combined. Celine pointed at a bright red coupe, laughed, and then motioned for one of the salesmen to follow her. This is more my style, she chirped, and everyone nodded like she'd said something profound. I stood beside a sleek dark blue model tucked in the back corner. It was understated quiet, the kind of car someone would drive if they didn't need to announce anything. I liked that, and that's when Dad walked over. "Hey sweetheart, can you do me a quick favor?" he said, casual as can be, handing me a thin stack of papers. "Just a formality, since you're already here, might as well help us get the financing started." I blinked. "What is this showroom paperwork?" He shrugged. "No big deal." He tapped where my name was already printed. "Already printed?" I looked up. Celine was watching from across the room, her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile, but she didn't say a word. Dad patted my shoulder. "Just once, you've always been the responsible one." I don't know why I signed. Maybe it was habit, maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was the part of me that still wanted to be useful. But the dealership name was on top, the loan language circled in blue pen, and my name, my full legal name, appeared 3 different times. When I handed it back, Celine had already turned away. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. I looked down and saw a notification from our family group chat. Except it wasn't meant for me. I could tell by the way the message was worded. A screenshot sent by mistake. "Let her come, her face makes us look generous." Beneath that, 3 laughing emojis. "Then don't worry, she still thinks she matters." I didn't flinch, didn't cry, I just stared. Somewhere across the room, my mother was complimenting the stitching on a car seat. My father chuckled at something Celine had said. The salesman laughed too, though I doubt he understood the joke. And me? I just stood there holding my phone like it had betrayed me. I should have walked over, I should have screamed, I should have thrown the damn thing in their faces, but I didn't. I locked the screen, slipped the phone into my back pocket, and looked around that showroom like I was seeing it for the first time. Not the cars, but the reflection of who I was to them. I walked toward the exit without saying a word. Outside, the sunlight was sharp and indifferent. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around me. My shoes echoed against the pavement. I didn't look back, because in that moment I knew something had changed, not in them, in me. I whispered, "I shouldn't have come, but maybe I needed to." Maybe sometimes you have to be erased to finally see the outline of your own worth. I didn't make it to the parking lot. My feet had taken me toward the exit. Yes, but something in my chest hadn't followed. I reached the sidewalk, took one breath, then another, and instead of heading to the street, I turned, circled the building slowly, keeping close to the wall like I was trying not to be noticed. Back near the valet entrance, I slipped in behind a delivery driver unloading bottled water. No one looked twice. I moved down the side hallway until I found myself tucked near the service lounge, half shielded by a column but with a clear view of the main floor. I don't know why I stayed. Maybe I needed to see them one more time, not just how they looked, but who they became when they thought I wasn't watching. They were still by the Ferrari. Celine was beaming, one hand on her hip, like she was posing for a photo. No one had asked for. My mother had taken off her jacket and was chatting with a couple by the coffee machine like she belonged to their social club, and my father laughing, animated, telling some story loud enough to be overheard. I stood still, a shadow in my own family's story. That's when Celine noticed me. She tilted her head, gave that rehearsed pageant smile, and strolled toward me, in her hand a bright yellow microfiber cloth. Oh hey, she said sweetly, since you're already here. She handed me the cloth. You missed a spot, she added, nodding toward a crimson Ferrari behind me. Might as well make yourself useful. A salesman chuckled. My father smirked. And my mother? My mother laughed genuinely. Oh stop, she said, waving one hand dismissively. Don't be dramatic, it's just a joke. A joke? Customers looked over. One woman smirked, another whispered something to her husband, who didn't even try to hide his grin. I stared at the cloth in my hand. It felt heavier than it should have, like a symbol, like a test. I walked to the car, looked at my reflection in the glass, wiped once, slow, deliberate, then I placed the cloth on the hood and turned back without a word. Celine had already moved on, flipping her hair and sashaying toward a man in a charcoal suit. I stayed near the edge of the room. The noise faded around me. Time stretched and twisted until all I could hear were fragments of voices overlapping and half-formed. She's got real taste, this one. Celine, right? She's expanding her brand next quarter, probably going national. And then came my mother's voice, clear, thoughtless. Celine's always been the one with presence, not like you know who some women just look like they settled. No offense. She didn't whisper it, she didn't glance around first, she didn't care that I was standing 3 steps behind her. I didn't react, didn't even blink, but inside something cracked, and this time it didn't seal itself back up like before. My eyes drifted toward the car. Again, a white Audi parked next to the Ferrari. 3 years ago, Celine couldn't make the final down payment. I'd quietly transferred $5 grand to her account the night before the deadline. She'd cried on the phone, called me a lifesaver. Not one word of that lived in the stories she told. Now no one remembered, no one ever had. They praised her growth, her poise, her vision, right there in front of the car she once needed help to keep. I backed away from the scene, found a quiet spot near the corner window next to a table of old magazines and untouched cappuccinos. I leaned against the glass, staring out at the sky that had turned a soft, indifferent gray. I thought about the texts, the rag, the laughter. I thought about how many times I'd stood in the background hoping they'd turn around, and now I realized I wasn't waiting anymore. I didn't want their attention, I wanted my peace. I wasn't going to beg for space in a room I helped build. I rested my palm on the cool glass, closed my eyes for a beat. This is the last time I show up where I'm not welcome, I whispered, and this time I meant it. I lingered under the overhang outside the showroom's side entrance, arms crossed, sunlight brushing the tops of parked cars. If they'd meant to cut me out, they'd succeeded, but as I stood there, something told me not to walk away. Not yet. I doubled back, retracing a discreet path through the back valet entrance. My steps were slower this time, measured. Inside, I took a seat near a brochure display, far enough from the crowd to disappear again, but close enough to hear everything. That's when I caught my father's voice, calm, charming, rehearsed. We've been supporting this dealership for years, he told the manager. It's a tradition in our family. Investing locally, keeping business flowing. Celine stood beside him, chin lifted, nodding along like she was born into power instead of borrowing it. My jaw clenched. I remembered the time I co-signed a lease under my name because Their credit wasn't enough. I remembered the years I worked 2 jobs while Celine studied lifestyle branding and bought handbags labeled investment pieces, but sure tradition. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. I had just turned to leave when my father stepped toward me, fishing something from the inside pocket of his blazer. He held it out between two fingers, a folded piece of paper yellowed at the corners. "You remember this?" he asked. His voice was light, like this was a fond memory. I hesitated, unfolded it slowly. A tuition payment receipt, 38 out the $200 paid in full, my name in block letters at the top. "That's what we paid for your degree," he said, then leaned in slightly. "We never asked for anything back, but gratitude's not so hard, is it?" I stared at the ink, at the numbers, and I got it. This wasn't a reminder, it was a receipt for a debt they believed I still owed. Every word behind his smile said the same thing: "You're lucky we let you sit at the table." I folded the paper and handed it back. "No worries," I said quietly. "I've paid it 1,000 times over." He didn't respond, just smiled like I hadn't spoken. That's when the tension hit a new kind of sharp. I turned toward the side exit. I was done, ready to walk away, before I said something that couldn't be unsaid. But as I stepped forward, a man in a gray blazer blocked my path. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said carefully, clipboard in hand. "I've been asked to escort you off the floor." I blinked. "Why?" He glanced at the clipboard. "We're not sure what your relationship is with the party inside. For security reasons, we need to clear non-buyer visitors." I blinked again, not sure I'd heard him right. "My name is on the application," I said evenly. "I'm family." He paused, hesitated, then looked to the side, and a uniformed security guard was already approaching. I didn't fight it, didn't raise my voice, but I looked him straight in the eye. "Are you escorting them too?" I asked, tilting my head toward the family still laughing by the Ferrari. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I nodded once, brushed past both men, and walked to the exit, not fast but slow, deliberate. From the corner of my eye, I caught Caleb, the younger salesman who'd offered me water earlier, watching. He mouthed something as I passed. I think it was, "I'm sorry." But no one said it out loud. No one stopped it. Outside, the sun had shifted slightly, casting long shadows across the lot. I stood by the valet railing, hands resting on the cold metal bar. I didn't cry, I didn't even blink. They were trying to erase me from the showroom, from the story. But the thing about erasure, sometimes it just makes space for something louder, and I was ready to speak. They expected me to disappear quietly, humiliated and small. Instead, I stayed right there. I didn't pace, I didn't flinch. I leaned against a short concrete pillar near the valet loop, letting the late afternoon sun fall on my shoulders. From that angle, I could still see them through the glossy showroom windows, smiling for photos, clinking their water bottles like they'd won something they hadn't. Not yet. I adjusted the cuff of my sleeve and felt something cool brush against my skin. I looked down the bracelet. It had been so long since I thought of it as anything more than an accessory, a thin silver band with an almost invisible inscription inside. Alexander had given it to me before our 3rd anniversary. I remember the way he said it quietly in the kitchen while I was halfway through organizing receipts. "You don't have to prove your worth," he told me, "but I know you'll keep trying anyway." Back then I laughed, shrugged it off. Today those words felt like lifelines. I turned the bracelet slowly on my wrist and ran my thumb across the inside. There it was, still faint but etched: "You don't have to prove your worth, not here, not anymore." That tiny message wrapped around my wrist like armor was the only voice I needed in that moment. Inside, Selene raised a champagne flute like she was hosting a gala, not just test driving a car. My mother stood next to her, eyes glowing with approval, like she'd finally shaped Celine into the presentable daughter she always wanted, someone who wouldn't hesitate to throw her own sister under the bus to maintain an illusion. I watched my reflection in the showroom glass. I didn't look like them, not in the designer heels or polished curls or fake affection for strangers who mispronounce our last name, but I looked real. I looked like someone who'd finally woken up. Footsteps approached slowly from the side. I didn't turn around. "Hey," a voice said, soft but clear. Mind if I stand here? It was Caleb, the younger salesman. I recognized the lanyard still hanging from his neck, but he had taken off his jacket like he'd clocked out early. He didn't say much, just stood beside me, both of us looking forward like we were watching a street performance. Neither of us understood. I saw what happened, he said after a beat. Back there, that wasn't right. I stayed quiet. I don't know your story, he continued, but I think you should know. People noticed. I glanced at him. He wasn't looking at me, just staring out at the street like it held answers. You handled it better than I would have, he added, hands stuffed into his pockets. Most folks would have shouted, caused a scene. You just walked away. Walking away is not weakness, I said, more to myself than him. He nodded slowly. No, it's knowing when they're not worth your words. There was silence between us, thick but not uncomfortable. Then he said something I didn't expect. Your silence. It hit harder than anything they said. For a second I wasn't in the showroom anymore. I was 10 years old, hiding behind the pantry door as Celine threw a tantrum over not being allowed to wear makeup. Mom had scolded her gently, then turned and snapped at me for eavesdropping. You're always lurking, Odlin, she'd said, always waiting to be offended. But I wasn't waiting now. I'd been pushed far enough to know this wasn't offense, it was fact. Caleb looked down at my wrist. That's a nice bracelet, he said. I smiled. It is, I replied. Doesn't match the outfit, but it matches the moment. He gave a soft chuckle. Fair enough. We stood for a few more minutes, not saying anything. Then I took a step toward the parking lot, not to drive away, but just to shift the weight on my feet. Caleb didn't follow. I hope they realize what they lost, he said. They won't, I answered, my voice calm. But I will. And with that I walked toward my car. I didn't start the engine, I just opened the door, tossed my bag inside and sat down. Window rolled halfway because I wasn't leaving yet, not until I saw the look on their faces when the next surprise pulled up. I didn't need to look back to feel it, the showroom door closing behind me, not with a bang but with a soft click that carried more finality than any slam could. But just as I reached my car, a well-dressed man in his mid-30s stepped out from the side entrance. He wasn't Caleb. No warmth, no hesitation. His badge read finance liaison. He approached with a clipboard tucked against his side like a verdict waiting to be handed down. Ms. Wren, he said, measured but polite. I turned. Yes, if I may have a moment. Just some paperwork needing finalization. It's about the co-signer amendment your parents asked to update the documents. Celine will be the sole applicant moving forward. I blinked. Wait, what? He gave a thin smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Standard adjustment, I'm told. Internal request shouldn't take more than a second. I stepped closer. I'm the one who signed the original documents. I co-signed that application this morning. He hesitated. That version was replaced. I believe you've been removed. Just like that. I followed him back through the side hall, past the espresso bar and promotional posters, the same space I'd walked through hours earlier. Except now something in the air had shifted. My own name didn't belong anymore. In the lounge area I sat across from the new stack of paperwork he handed me, unspoken pressure pushing down on my shoulders like weight I couldn't trace. I reached for the top sheet. There it was, Celine's name in bold, centered clean, no trace of mine. I flipped the next page, all blank signature lines. Except hers. She'll be handling the financing solo, he clarified, like he was offering some kind of prize. It's actually more efficient this way. I didn't respond. I just set the papers down. Odlin, my mother's voice drifted over as she passed through. You always said you didn't care about credit, so this shouldn't bother you, right? She didn't stop walking. She didn't even turn to look at me. It wasn't just exclusion anymore. This was a razor not forgotten, deleted. I stood up slowly. The room was quiet, but every sound felt amplified. The hiss of a cappuccino machine, the tap-tap of someone's acrylic nails on their phone screen, the low hum of fake laughter behind glass, and then the second blow landed. Another manager, older, crisp suit, firm walk, approached with a kind of forced composure I'd seen used on shoplifters and lost tourists. Ma'am, he said with a businesslike tone, we've been asked to kindly have you step outside the lounge. You're not on the purchasing profile and the sales floor is getting busier. I stared at him. Is there a reason? I asked, not moving. We just want to maintain a certain atmosphere for our clients, he said. I felt the corners of my mouth tighten. For Your real clients, you mean? He didn't answer, just stood with a clipped professionalism, giving me time to choose. Dignity over disruption, so I walked again, only this time there was no pretense left, no more politeness in my silence. The valet circle was quieter now. The sun had dropped lower, stretching shadows across the pavement. I found a wide concrete planter by the hedge and sat cool stone against the back of my legs, quiet except for the occasional burst of laughter from inside. I sat still for a second. I wondered if this was the smarter move, to just let it all go, let them win this one, save myself the bruises. Wasn't that what peace looked like? Maybe peace meant not needing to be right. Maybe maturity was walking away without needing the last word. Maybe silence was strength. But then my phone buzzed, a notification from the family group chat. I opened it knowing I shouldn't. A photo had just been uploaded. Celine posing beside the red convertible with both of our parents smiling proudly at her sides. The caption read, "Good things come to those who deserve it." I didn't feel rage or even grief. I felt done. Without flinching, I deleted the entire thread. Years of messages, birthdays, reminders, check-ins, fake apologies gone, not because I was angry, but because I was done cataloging a life where I only ever showed up to prove I didn't need a seat. I put my phone down and looked out over the street, quiet and dusky now, and I stayed. No plans, no speeches, no grand revenge yet, just the beginning of a different kind of presence, one they wouldn't see coming. Because they never really saw me at all. I hadn't moved from the planter. The light had softened around me, tinting the pavement with a golden wash. The showroom glass still reflected my family's laughter. Celine's voice floated through faintly when the door opened to let a couple out. A flash of her laugh, then it closed again like a scene looping inside a snow globe I no longer lived in. But outside I had space, no one looking through me, no one asking for my signature, my silence, my seat in the shadows. Then I heard it before I saw it, the low, velvety hum of an engine, so smooth it didn't growl. It announced the kind of sound that didn't have to prove anything. The valet line shifted even from where I sat. I could see heads turn, and then it pulled into view, a Rolls Royce Phantom. Extended midnight blue, clean enough to swallow the sky. The chrome on the grille didn't just gleam, it judged. The logo alone probably cost more than Celine's entire wardrobe. It rolled up with the unbothered confidence of someone who knows they're never asked to explain. My sister, visible now behind the glass wall, froze mid-gesture, her fingers always fluttering when she spoke, dropped. Our mother stood beside her, confusion tightening around her mouth. I stood up, brushing off my jeans, not in preparation, but in quiet recognition. I didn't smile, not even a twitch. I just stood and waited. The driver door opened slowly, and there he was, Alexander, tailored suit, steady gait, face unreadable but not cold, not this time. He rounded the car, buttoning his jacket with one fluid motion. I didn't expect a speech, he never gave those. When he reached the passenger door, he opened it like it was a ceremony. "Ready?" he asked. That was all. I stepped in. Celine had pressed herself to the glass now, hand flattening against it like a child staring at something she couldn't name. My mother tilted forward as if leaning closer would make sense of what she was seeing. Our father was already on the phone, mouth tight, pacing like something had slipped loose. No one came outside, no one stopped the car. Alexander didn't glance at them, he didn't nod, didn't wave, he just closed the door. After I settled in, walked around and slid behind the wheel, he drove slowly, no rush, no need to flee. The silence between us was clean. As we pulled out of the circle, I caught Caleb at the edge of the lot. He didn't smile, just gave a nod, barely a movement, but enough. I leaned back inside the showroom. Every face was turned our way, but no one opened a door and no one stepped forward. It was already too late. The road smoothed out under us. Jacksonville's lights blurred past the windows. I didn't speak, neither did Alexander. He didn't need to ask how it went, and I didn't need to explain why I hadn't called him. Sometimes the people who know your silences are the only ones who deserve to hear your truths. I stared out the window as the world softened into dusk. It wasn't revenge I'd needed, not drama, not spectacle, just proof, quiet, irrefutable, that I'd never been invisible and never would be again. By the time I got home that night, I already knew Celine wouldn't let the silence last. She never could. I didn't check my Phone until morning, but the notifications had bloomed like weeds overnight, hundreds of them tangled with tags, group texts, Instagram mentions, and forwarded screenshots from mutuals I hadn't heard from in years. Her post was long, just long enough to be vague but calculated. A filtered photo of her standing alone next to the car, glossy lips, chin slightly lifted, the caption, "Hard work pays off even when others try to ride your name in someone else's wallet." Then came the stories, a few slides hinting that a certain person had twisted facts for sympathy and disrupted an important family milestone. No names, of course, she'd never say my name, not even to defame me directly, that would be giving me too much credit, but the comments didn't need clarity. I always knew something was off about her. Some people are allergic to not being the center. Girl, you handled that with such grace. Celine didn't just lie, she made herself the hero of my restraint. I didn't reply, not then. Instead, I poured coffee, fed the dog, and opened my laptop. I already knew what needed to happen, not because I wanted to be vindictive, but because she wasn't done yet. Just before noon, my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. I picked up. "Ms. Ren," a man asked. "Yes, this is Jonathan Kim, one of the co-owners at the Beach and Crest Auto Group. I was hoping we could talk briefly." His tone was careful, like he was walking across thin ice. "I understand there was some confusion during your recent visit. Is that what we're calling it now?" He chuckled softly. "Fair. I just got off a call with someone who made certain claims that you were emotionally unstable, that you created a scene. There was even a mention of potential legal threats." I let the silence hang then. "And you believed her?" "I didn't say that. I said I heard it." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "Would you like to see what I brought with me that day?" "Actually," he said quickly, "I was about to ask if you'd be willing to meet this afternoon in person, just you and me. I'll be there in an hour." The meeting took place in a private lounge off the main dealership floor. No cameras, no marketing banners. Just two chairs, a small glass table, and a pitcher of water. He was already seated when I walked in, tie loosened slightly, brows furrowed with fatigue or hesitation. I couldn't tell which. I didn't sit right away. I placed the folder on the table. He looked at it like it might bite first. I said my original co-S signature on the purchase document, including timestamps. I slid it forward. Second text messages from my sister and mother asking me to sign just for convenience, not because I was actually part of the purchase. Of course, another set of papers. Third, screenshots from our family group chat, including the one where I was called a useful liability. His face twitched. "And finally," I said, pulling out my phone, an audio recording from the lounge area about 10 minutes before I was asked to leave. I tapped play. Celine's voice filled the room, clear and sharp. "She thinks she's involved. She's just here to make us look generous. Trust me, she's too used to being invisible to fight back." I stopped the audio, looked up. Jonathan's hands were folded tightly on the table. "She said all that in your building," I added, "on a day when she was representing your brand." He cleared his throat. "I appreciate the clarity. No lawsuits," I said flatly. "No public statements unless she keeps pushing. I'm not here to make trouble, but I'm also not here to be her." Footnote. He nodded slowly. "Understood. And if I were you," I added, "I'd rethink who gets to represent your image." That evening I didn't post a paragraph. I didn't rant or explain or hint. I uploaded one picture standing beside the Rolls Royce. No filters, no pose, just me and Jean's, hands by my side, eyes steady. The next slide, a scanned copy of the original financing agreement, my name, my contribution stamped and signed, caption, "Silence is power, but truth is oxygen." I didn't refresh the comments. I didn't check who reposted. I didn't need to, because 15 minutes later the family group chat, which had been curiously silent all day, lit up again. A single message from Caleb that was the quietest takedown I've ever seen. "You earned every second." By sunrise the fire Celine started was already burning down. I didn't have to throw gasoline. The truth had a way of catching its own wind. Still, just before noon my father called. "Your mother and I think it's time to clear the air," he said like it was a weather report. "Family dinner tonight, 6 o'clock. Bellamari." He didn't ask, he expected. I could have declined, I should have, but something told me the storm hadn't passed. It had only changed direction. So I went, and this time I didn't show up in jeans. I wore a cobalt blue dress that fit like I'd been saving it for this moment. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough To remind the room I hadn't disappeared when I walked into the restaurant, heads turned not because of the dress or the heels or the way my hair fell to one side, but because for once Celine wasn't the first person anyone noticed. She was already seated, of course, at the center of the table, laughing too loud, sipping from a glass of wine like it was a trophy. My parents sat across from her, their posture tight, nervous, smiles thin and cracked. When I pulled out my chair, the conversation stalled and I felt it. That shifting air, the silence that followed, a new presence, not the kind that demanded space, but the kind that changed the shape of the room. Dinner started with tight-lipped questions and thinner answers. How's your week been? Busy. How's Alexander? He's good. Traveling less these days. Small talk floated between us, hollow and fragile like china cups set on an already tilting table. Halfway through the sea base, my phone buzzed beside my plate. It was an email forwarded from Alexander. Subject: contract withdrawal confirmation. I opened it with 2 taps. And there it was, his message to the Beach and Crest dealership board. Due to public reputation concerns and ethical alignment with our values, we are formally suspending the corporate acquisition for the Q3 luxury fleet. Order 3.2 manner effective immediately. I didn't look up right away, but I didn't have to. Celine's voice cracked first. What? My father leaned forward. What did you just see? I turned my screen toward them, held it steady. Their faces changed. My mother's lips pressed together. You didn't have to go that far, she muttered. I tilted my head. Far? I didn't go far. I just stopped being quiet. The silverware clinked against half-finished plates. A waiter passed, then retreated quickly. Celine's hands trembled on the tablecloth. You've always needed to win, she hissed. Even as a kid you couldn't just let me have one thing, not even this. I met her eyes, calm, clear. You mean the showroom? I helped you fund the tuition bills I quietly paid when mom and dad forgot your scholarship didn't cover summer classes. Or do you mean the silence I gave you every time you called me a side character in my own life? Her jaw locked. My father looked like he might stand. No one did, not even her. For the first time no one defended her, and I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I excused myself after dessert, didn't wait for goodbyes, didn't leave my coat behind for an excuse to return. On the drive home, the city lights blurred into long streaks, my hands steady on the wheel, my thoughts quieter than I expected. When I got home, there was a single envelope slipped under the door. I bent to pick it up. No stamp, no return address, just my name in soft ink. Inside was a formal letter from the HOA board of our community. They'd seen the recent public fallout, the Instagram stories, the reposts, the contract screenshots, and the final paragraph read, given the misalignment with community values and integrity standards, we're removing Celine Wren from our sponsored public events and marketing placements. If you are open to partnership opportunities, we would welcome your presence in future initiatives. I read it twice, then once more, not because I needed validation, but because for the first time it was offered freely. No strings, no guilt trips, no quiet debts disguised as favors, just acknowledgement. Later that night I stepped into the bedroom and placed the silver bracelet on my dresser. I didn't need it today. I hadn't touched it once. But I wasn't putting it away. It was part of the woman who walked out of that showroom, and that woman, she was never walking back in the same way again. The next morning came quietly, as if the world itself had decided not to interfere. Sunlight drifted through the kitchen window in long golden streaks. It warmed the marble counter, the small ceramic mug in my hands, and the corner of the garden I could see from the back porch. Alexander sat at the table reading the paper, his glasses pushed low on his nose. There was no article about Celine, no headline scandal, just a business brief on market shifts and community updates piece disguised in print. I stirred a little honey into my tea and walked barefoot to the small patch of green I'd planted last spring. Lavender, rosemary, a few geraniums that had no business blooming this late in the season but did anyway. No buzzing from my phone, no calls, no apologies, and surprisingly I didn't miss them. For years I thought reconciliation meant hearing the words, "I'm sorry." But peace, I was learning, had very little to do with anyone else's timing and everything to do with mine. I set the watering can down and leaned against the garden post, letting the warmth of the mug seep through my fingers. It felt earned, not Given not begged for earned my mind wandered to the showroom, the sharp smell of new leather, the artificial light that made even betrayal look polished. I remembered the way Celine smiled when she handed me that rag. You missed a spot. And how my mother chuckled. Don't be dramatic, it's just a joke. I remembered the sting not just of the moment but of every time before that, the quiet comments, the erasers. You've never had presence, you're too quiet for leadership, you never really wanted much, did you? They said those things like compliments and I accepted them like terms until I didn't. But more than the sting, I remembered Caleb, his voice soft. Sure, if it were me, he'd said I'd want someone to tell me. Your silence was louder than anything they said. That stuck. So did the look on their faces when the doors closed behind the Rolls Royce. It wasn't fear, it was confusion, because they couldn't grasp a version of me that didn't need them to clap in order to stand. Later that afternoon I returned to the bedroom. The drawer where I kept the silver bracelet sat slightly ajar. I opened it slowly and lifted the chain into the light. It still caught the sun just right. I turned it over in my palm, tracing the engraving with my thumb. You don't have to prove your worth, I whispered it this time. Not for reassurance but for remembrance. Then I placed it inside a small wooden box, not out of anger, out of completion. That version of me, she's resting now. I glanced at my phone on the nightstand. 3 unread messages from my mother. Can we talk? From Celine. You made your point, hope it was worth it. And from Caleb, the new interns. Of you, quiet but sharp, don't ever doubt your impact. I replied to Caleb with one line, thank you for seeing me. The other 2 I left them unread. That wasn't spite, that was clarity. I stepped out onto the porch just as a soft breeze rolled through, stirring the herbs in the hem of my linen shirt. The air smelled clean, like new beginnings. Without ceremony I thought about all the people I'd tried to keep close out of duty, not joy. All the explanations I'd offered to people committed to misunderstanding me. People think forgiveness means giving others another chance. I said aloud to no one in particular. Sometimes forgiveness is giving yourself a new story without them in it. I stood a little taller, not because I was proud but because I no longer felt small, and it was strange how silence didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt earned, deserved, powerful. The flowers I planted last year, tender, uncertain, were now blooming without permission. I smiled and thought, maybe I am too. My phone buzzed again, one last time. I didn't check it, I didn't need to. They looked regretful in the end, but I wasn't waiting anymore. Have you ever outgrown people who once made you feel small just by standing tall in silence? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. And if no one has told you this today, you don't need to prove your worth, you already have it. See you in the next